This is definitely the hottest new anime in October. The male protagonist was originally a lowly dragon hunter, but one day he witnessed the tragic death of Leo. From that moment on, he became crazy, and the resentment in his heart drove him to constantly wave the silver sword in his hand. However, instead of letting him get relief from death, these battles made him unknowingly become the strongest dragon hunter in the world. He is stronger than anyone now, but looking around, there is not a single thing left that he wants to protect. Until a witch appears, the male protagonist finally finds a way to change everything, which is to give his invincible power to his past self. At the beginning of the story, the male protagonist suddenly heard a strange sound while hunting a dragon. Seeing that he was distracted during the battle, the dragon took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack on him. Although the male protagonist had raised his shield in time, his weak strength could not compete with the opponent. Seeing that the male protagonist was about to die, a girl stopped in front of him in time, and saw a flash of sword light, and the next second the dragon died under the girl's sword. Seeing the other party smiling and advised him to concentrate when fighting, then male protagonist took off his helmet and expressed his gratitude to her, but unexpectedly, the girl named Leo suddenly became unwilling. After all, he had already told the male protagonist what he should do when praising him. After thinking for a moment, the male protagonist stood up and put his hand directly on Leo's little head. There has been a kind of demonic blood race called dragons in this world since ancient times. They feed on humans. There are only two ways to kill each other. One is to freeze their blood with the silver gas emitted by silver weapons, and the other is to freeze their blood. That is to burn his body with the sun. With Leo freezing the dragon's heart, their mission was finally completed. When he returned to the city, the scar on Leo's face instantly attracted people's attention. After all, this was the mark of the legendary child prodigy. Even though Leo was not tall, countless dragons died under his hands. At only 12 years old, he became the strongest dragon hunter in the city. Although the male protagonist is weak compared to Leo, he doesn't care about it because his only wish in this life is to stay by Leo's side. During the conversation, a man suddenly spoke up. He mocked the male protagonist for his identity, but the embarrassing thing was that the two male protagonists did not recognize him at all. Now the man was angry. After all, he was Sykes, the second-ranked dragon hunter in the city. Although Sykes was a little embarrassed, but with the comfort of his men, Sykes decided to do it again. He said that the male protagonist, a bottom dragon hunter, being paired with Leo was simply insulting to each other. At first, the male protagonist ignored Sykes' provocation, until the words Broomstar appeared, and the angry Leo drew his sword and pointed it at Sykes. He questioned what the people holding silver swords were pursuing. Wealth, status, or honor, these things are of no value to Leo. What he pursues is the strongest. From the first time he picked up the silver sword, he vowed that he would be better than everyone else, because dragons are the most powerful of all creatures, so he became a dragon hunter. Even the strongest dragon god in legend is just a future prey in Leo's eyes. Then he turned around and looked at everyone watching. As long as someone was willing to join him, he could share any amount of wealth and status with him. Hearing Leo's words, everyone who was smiling just now was instantly frightened and did not dare to say a word. Only the male protagonist silently raised his hand. He was willing to follow Leo until death. Seeing this scene, Leo burst into laughter, and this was also the reason why he liked the male protagonist. Seeing that the matter was over, Leo immediately smiled and said he was going back to sleep. By the way, he also wants to leave all the bathing and brushing of teeth to the male protagonist. This time it was Sykes' turn to be confused. Looking at the sleeping Leo, the hero showed a happy smile on his face. Then he went to the forest to practice his sword skills as usual. The male protagonist knows that he does not have the talent to be a dragon hunter, and even if he works hard all his life, he will never be as good as Leo. But it didn't matter, as long as he could help Leo a little more before he died, he would be satisfied. However, as soon as the male protagonist finished speaking, an illusory and mysterious man suddenly appeared behind him. He bluntly stated that the hero's wish would not come true and one day Leo would die in front of his eyes. In a trance, countless memories poured into the male protagonist's mind. He seemed to have appeared on a battlefield full of fire. Leo's face was full of pain as countless long hairs penetrated his body, leaving the male protagonist alone in pain, wailing. When he desperately woke up from the nightmare, the mysterious man from before only left a sentence of no time and quietly disappeared here. The male protagonist didn't know if all this was an illusion, but when he saw Leo sleeping soundly, he felt inexplicably uneasy, and he could only practice his sword harder. However, recently for some unknown reason, dragon-slaying missions have been unexpectedly rare, so the male protagonist decided to take advantage of this time to give Leo a haircut. Although the male protagonist's fighting ability is pitifully weak, it must be said that he is still very talented in taking care of people. But looking at Leo's white neck, the scene of the other party's tragic death appeared in front of the male protagonist's eyes again. Although he told himself that it was all false, from that day on he would wake up to the same nightmare every night. At the same time, the Union discovered that the dragon's movements had changed recently, but the city they targeted had never been attacked by a dragon in the past 10 years. When Leo mentioned it, the first thing he thought of was the famous dessert inside. However, at this time, the male protagonist had no time to pay attention to it. He just wanted to know whether what the mysterious man said was true. Perhaps the male protagonist was too obvious, and Leo quickly discovered his abnormality. Looking at the male protagonist's obvious dark circles and skinned hands, Leo knew that he must be practicing harder than before. Seeing the girl caring about him, the male protagonist lowered his head. He didn't know what he could do for Leo. Apart from taking care of him in daily life, how could he become Leo's assistant? Seeing the confused look on the male protagonist's face, Leo smiled. He still remembered that when he first met the male protagonist, what he was thinking was that this man seemed to be able to become as strong as himself. Although the male protagonist does not have the talent to be a dragon hunter, Leo's intuition tells him that the male protagonist will definitely become stronger. Although he didn't know when that would happen or under what circumstances, this was what he was looking forward to. Leo then held the male protagonist in his arms. The male protagonist's parents died in the mouth of a dragon when he was 3 years old, and the person who adopted him also followed closely behind. After he is adopted by a kind-hearted rich man, everything there was also destroyed by the dragon. Although the male protagonist survived every time, but since then he has become synonymous with the broom star. He honestly doesn't know if there is any place for him to stay in this world. Until that day comes, a dirty girl suddenly invites the male protagonist to become a dragon hunter. In his opinion, being able to survive every time he encounters a dragon is actually a gift. And he doesn't care. The so-called curse makes him die because he is too weak. As long as he is stronger than the dragon, he will not die. He will prove it to the male protagonist in the future. Looking at Leo's outstretched hand, the male protagonist seemed to see redemption. Until the moment the two held hands tightly, their journey began. No matter how powerful the dragon is, he can't get along with Leo, and Leo also used his actions to prove that the curse on the male protagonist is just a joke. Looking at the girl's smile, the male protagonist was completely redeemed. Because of Leo's presence, he no longer regarded himself as a broom star. He just wanted to stay by her side until the moment he was killed by the dragon. Apart from that, he has nothing else to ask for. A terrible thing happened that day. The city of Peel, which said it did not need dragon hunters, was destroyed overnight. Upon hearing the news, the male protagonist's face suddenly became extremely shocked. He trembled and told Leo to run away, but it was too late at this time because their city was also attacked by a dragon. Faced with this situation, Leo, as the strongest man in the city, of course could not sit idly by and ignore the male protagonist's obstruction. He quickly rushed to the center of the disaster, and at this time, a humanoid black creature walked out of the flames. The soldiers thought he was a survivor, but they didn't expect that they would be torn to pieces by blood hair in the next second. As the cylindrical flames soared into the sky, a terrifying dragon man finally revealed his true face. At the same time, the male protagonist chasing Leo finally arrived at the scene. Looking at the figure of the dragon man, he finally realized that all the previous nightmares were true. The scene of Leo's tragic death seemed to be right in front of him. The Lord will never allow this to happen. On the other side, Sykes recognized the dragon man in front of him as the legendary Grimwald dragon, and fear prevented him from moving at all. At this critical moment of life and death, the male protagonist's figure suddenly jumped out of the fire. He knew that as long as he solved this guy, Leo would be rescued, so he swung the sword desperately, but it was all in vain. The dragon man smiled contemptuously, and the raging flames instantly swept through the city, and the male protagonist was also knocked into the river by this move. Fortunately, Leo arrived in time. He quickly called Sykes to rescue the male protagonist, but he resolutely stood in front of the dragon man. Leo had never been so angry as he was now, and he vowed to cut the dragon man into pieces. At this time, after the male protagonist fell into the river, his memory about the future seemed to be clearer. After Leo's death, he fought desperately and became stronger. Although he also found new partners in the process, in the end only he survived. However, even so, he still did not gain relief from death in the battle. And this is the future of the male protagonist in the past of the mysterious man. The mysterious man cannot forgive the male protagonist. He worships young girls as heroes. While he is content with the status quo, he also has illusions. If the male protagonist really values him, he should make himself stronger than anyone else. The current mysterious man is very strong, even comparable to the dragon god, but at this time there is nothing left for him to protect. Really? As the silver sword penetrated the male protagonist's body, he suddenly let out a painful cry. At this moment, the past and the future are closely connected, and the male protagonist also gains the power of the future. Although all this comes at a price, he doesn't care because he wants to completely smash the established future. On the other side, Leo was already in a tough battle. He had never seen such a powerful enemy. He even suspected that this dragon man was the legendary dragon god. Hearing these words, the dragon man was instantly furious. What qualifications does a guy like him have to be compared with the dragon god? Seeing that Leo once again escaped his flames, the dragon people introduced themselves as just the lowest existence among the superior dragons, and the reason why they wanted to destroy this country was also very simple. The favorite tribute of their great dragon god was human desserts. None more so than the dessert shop in Peel. However, the store was forced to close down due to encounters with robbers some time ago, and this was the real reason why a dragon never appeared in Pierre. But it was too late because the angry dragon god had already issued the order. This was the reason. The survival of the human country was only a matter of the dragon god's words. In their eyes, the existence of dragon hunters should not be too ridiculous. Seeing that Leo finally realized the insignificance of human beings, the dragon man finally decided to give him one last chance. Unexpectedly, an indescribable feeling of fear swept through his body in the next second. Although he looked back and saw nothing at all, he knew that this was not an illusion and that something was really coming towards him. With a crisp sound, Longquan, which was raging in the city, was frozen for an instant, and what appeared in front of everyone was a thin figure. For the past 10 years, the male protagonist has been fighting like this. Unknowingly, the silver sword has become a part of him. The severe pain in his body has not made him give up swinging the sword. After 5 years, the silver sword has completely become a part of him. After merging, his flesh has turned into a weapon that can emit silver weapons. 7 years later, he mastered the method of freely manipulating silverware. Just like this, another 10 years passed, and the male protagonist crossed one mortal realm after another, and finally completed the strongest record in the world. The Dragon Man knew very well that this feeling was the same as what he felt in the adults who were given the title of king by the dragon god. It was the fear of the absolutely strong. As the smoke dissipated, the male protagonist was breathing heavily as if he was surviving a disaster. It wasn't until Leo called out his name that the male protagonist slowly came to his senses. Don't embarrass him. The gears of fate seem to have stopped turning at this moment. The witch reminds the future male protagonist that all this comes at a price. The past male protagonist will not live long after accepting this power. But looking at the male protagonist's calm expression, the witch chuckled. This was the first time he saw the male protagonist without a frown on his face. Next, he will look at the performance of him and the male protagonist in the past. He only hoped that a world where all dragons have been wiped out will come. On the other side, after the male protagonist's support, the town finally stabilized. Although he still couldn't believe the fact that Leo was still alive, he finally calmed down after being comforted by the other party. Seeing Sykes asking about their plans for the future, the hero suggested that they might as well leave the country. The dragon god's order was absolute, so as long as they crossed the border, they would be safe. Sykes was shocked by the male protagonist's proposal, and he doubted whether the male protagonist was actually him. With a loud noise, Leo and the two suddenly discovered that the forest in the distance had launched an attack on them. Seeing this, Leo quickly ran over.